come on." Thomas thrust George Paget to one side, as the man was about to get into his car. He pulled the men away and jabbed towards the forest, but Dr. Thompson had stood his ground, and shook his head. "You came to me, Dr. Thompson," Thomas told him angrily. "You told me that me Lucina lives. If you will not come with me, I will begin the conversation here, and now, where anyone can hear us." George Paget Thompson stared back at him, but it was hard for Thomas to tell what the glare meant. "Then, I will ask you of ... Professor Lindman, is that his name?" Thomas began, "and, which company did you say tube alloys represented?" But Dr. Thompson pushed Thomas back, and struggled out of his grasp. But he did not dive towards his car. Instead, he pulled Thomas with him around to the passenger side, and gave a "come on," opening the passenger seat of the Triumph Roadster. Thomas took the hint, and within minutes, they were heading down Downton's Drive at a mighty rate. The children waved as the car went past. Thomas noticed that Ernst was not with them. When he got back, when he had supervised the party, he would find a quiet moment to speak to the boy, tell him, no, offer him the chance to be adopted, to be his son, and remain in England. Things had changed too, now, of course. If his mother was alive, he needed to know more, Thomas decided, and more than knowing, find her, bring her home. Once they got onto the lane that led to Downton village, Dr. Thompson turned onto the road that led to the railway station. Beyond it lay the main north-south road. A goods van swerved as they got to the fork that was the choice between the Great North Road and the moorland road to Whitby. Wherever were they going? But Thompson was not intending to drive Thomas Barrow south, to Cambridge, or elsewhere, but pulled into a lay-by near the back of the Davis farm. "Milo," Thomas told him. "My me Lucina." The words were out before he could stop them. Thomas was, unreservedly, unashamedly attracted to men. Emotionally, sexually. But Milo was Milo, and he loved her, for her. There was no category Thomas could think of for their attachment to one another. "She is alive?" "Alive, but we don't know where she is," Thompson confirmed. "And, as for tube alloys, this is ICI under another name, to make it innocuous." Chadwick formed the Maud Project, to investigate the role of uranium in the war. And then it was given by the Prime Minister to Frederick Lindman. He engineered her return. He engineered her leaving too. Through Prue? Thomas asked. In a way, Thompson conceded. Prue was taken when he landed on British soil and handed over to the authorities in Ireland. While republicanism is encouraged, collaboration with the Nazis is not. Since America involved herself in the war, Thomas replied, acidly. Since the Irish realized that what was bad John Bull, and for the rest of Europe, would be bad for the Free State, Thompson replied, equally tartly. Many have been rounded up, shot, hanged. Some chose to starve themselves in prison. Thomas flinched, thinking of the idea of the Troskad. And what did Prue choose? Thomas asked, suspecting he knew the answer. Thompson turned his head. He was depriving himself of food, Mr. Barrow. Angry that his country for which he had fought so long and hard to become free had refused to go along with him to what he believed was the logical conclusion. He was brought out several weeks ago and shot. But, you know, there was another reason Ireland did not get into bed, so to speak, with Germany. Erwin Schrödinger, one of yours, Thomas remembered. Chadwick laughed briefly. You could say that. A Jewish scientist, used a threat 10 years ago and invited by the Free State to boost their economy. He was a womanizer, I tell you that. Thompson smoothed the leather of the steering wheel. Eamon de Valera offered him citizenship, to raise the profile of science in Southern Ireland. He had convinced the Prime Minister it would not be in Ireland's interests to collaborate with Germany. George Paget looked at Thomas. He and Heisenberg did not get on, professionally. Personally, he objected to Schrödinger's manner with Ashby. I do know that. And you want to know, and Chadwick wanted to know if she had arrived here. Thompson looked sheepish, and victory lingered in Thomas's heart for a moment. Considering I thought she was dead these past 2 years, no, I have not seen her. Perhaps you should be talking to the person who told you she was alive. Thompson rubbed his head. I did, Thompson told Thomas. But Lindman said nothing of substance, in his usual rambling way. Then why isn't he the one talking to me? Thomas asked. 1. Because you would have found him too obnoxious, and he looked across to Thomas again. I am going to tell you something which might be difficult to hear, Mr. Barrow. Me Lucina Ashby went to Germany as a traitor to her country. She turned up in Berlin, with the help of Lindman's spies, with the story that she had information key to a nuclear bomb. She was placed at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, beside Heisenberg, and Hahn, von Weizsäcker, both P.I. Earls. He trailed off as Thomas turned to him. But she would never betray her country, nor go along with such scheme. Thomas returned, angrily. Unless she thought she had no choice. Thompson's face was sad, grim. What do you mean? Thomas demanded. I mean, those times that you visited Cambridge, socialized in the illegal, pop-up clubs, with Blackett, Ashby in accompaniment. It had not gone unnoticed. But Thomas was still angry, and leaned towards Thompson. Blackett would never say anything, no one would. And you are right, Mr. Barrow, you truly are. But Lindman made Ashby believe it, Thompson said, grimly. He made her believe that you, Mr. Barrow, were to be arrested if she did not go along with it. Already she felt terrible that she had conceived a child, and given him up for adoption. But Thomas wasn't listening. Instead, his mind was racing, reeling at the news. She thought I would be arrested, imprisoned. She had seen what had happened with people who resisted the law in Germany. She must have cared for you dearly, Mr. Barrow, Thompson concluded. So, it fell to Chadwick, fell to me, to tell you this news. The second reason it was us and not Lindman is that he was the Prime Minister's man. He was not enough in the know of the Maud project, that is, the British effort at understanding and industrializing the uranium chain reaction to produce ... well, unlimited energy. Or a bomb, Thomas replied. Just so, said George Paget. So, what are you telling me this for, Dr. Thompson? I mean, I am grateful. She is alive, Mr. Barrow, he reiterated. But you don't know where she is? Thomas pressed. We ... this is a little embarrassing. She was ... let go. No one knows who by, or even when. She was taken overland to Britain, and then ended up at a stately home in Cambridgeshire. We, that is, Chadwick and I, visited her there. Then you saw her? Thomas asked, incredulously. How was she? How is she? But Thompson was shaking his head, and looked down. She was let go, Mr. Barrow, allowed to escape, before the others arrived. Before we could even see how she was. Others? The other uranium club scientists were to be arriving, did arrive, in June. This cannot be repeated, to anyone, actually considering tomorrow, and so the men she worked with have been taken prisoner, Thomas asked him. Thompson nodded. Now that is a good plan, isn't it? Put them all together in a stately home, see what secrets, what intelligence they spill. And another thought struck Thomas. Did Ernst know his father was in England? He refused to speak about him, but had he been prompted to find him? I cannot tell you, Mr. Barrow. I didn't ask, Thomas told him. You and Chadwick came to me, remember? And this Lindman ... used her most ill. Thomas shook his head, looking out along the country road. A tractor drawing a bed of hay bales toiled along the road. Thompson was right. It was better that this Professor Frederick Lindman had not come to give Thomas the news, for he might be hanged for bloody murder. And we thought you'd want to know, Thompson concluded. She gave Downton Abbey as her address. George Paget Thompson started the engine of the car and they were soon driving up the driveway of the big house. I am grateful for you telling me this, Thomas told him, as he got out of the car. He had asked Dr. Thompson to pull round the back, near the kitchen yard, although this seemed to provoke more interest rather than less. He made to get out of the car, but Thompson toed his arm. Here, he told Thomas, and to his surprise held out something. It had been 20 years ago Thomas had had that made, commissioned when he had visited his brother, a timepiece suitable for her to use in the library, on a fashionable lavalier chain, long and slender. Thompson hung it out in front of Thomas, and did not resist when Thomas took it. It was taken from her by the SS in '43. It was in Jack Prue's possession, along with her letters. And Thomas held it, tears pricking his eyes, as he fought to hold on to his composure. Surely everyone could see she had been set up. Surely from his own pocket, Thomas took the opals, and showed them to George Paget Thompson. These were hers, too. They were my mother's, and it was long thought that they were plaster and paste. But Milo found a way to determine they were from Australia, and were indeed genuine. He held both the Lavalier watch and the opals up in front of him, the summer light falling on them merrily. Thomas smiled, faintly, but happily. When she returns, I can give them both back to her now. Then, he pushed them into his livery pocket. Come, Dr. Thompson, Thomas said, brightly. Won't you meet Ernst? 88,888,888. It was ironic that the Uranverin were taken to Hall Farm, a large house in the Cambridgeshire countryside. Werner Heisenberg estimated that the house was only a few miles from the university. He missed her. His Liebeln. Before they had had a chance to run, the 10 of them were captured by American troops, who had driven up the hill to the church at the center of Hagelosh, and had barred the entrance to cave where the uranium machine was being built. No one had run. He liked to think they were too dignified for that. But the truth, probably, was that they knew they would have been shot. Shouts came up from the village, protests at the invasion, from the burgomaster, from other councillors. Even a mother whose garden had been driven over had come to berate the Americans for ruining her begonias. And Melusina had not run. Oh, the dear, she hadn't. Instead, she had stood proud and tall beside young Bag, claiming her position. Dangerous. And when a man came to take her away, hand on her shoulder, words in her ear, she did not even turn round to look at them all, just meekly strode away. The man was not even armed, and his slightness and wiriness would not have made him prominent in a crowd. He had disagreed with Melusina ever since Copenhagen. Ever since she went and was brought back again, no longer as healthy as when she had left, and ever after. If it was not Melusina who was asking him, however, it was the noble Count von Weizsäcker. Melusina and von Weizsäcker, what a pair! They were forever playing practical jokes on the rest of them like small children, such as, one morning, locking up the gates of the cave and going up high onto the ridge of the cave to drop Weiser petals onto the heads of the arriving men, who had stopped in wonder as to why the site was locked up, or replacing all the lids of the radiation housing so the chemical elements spelled out the word pure, in the German language, until someone realized it was not a description of the quality of the water, but that it contained plutonium and uranium. Not that they were supposed to know about plutonium. As far as Albert Speer's official record ran, none of them were meant to be in the position to concentrate enough uranium-235 from samples brought to them, but they had, and they did. He had put it about that the quantity needed would be several thousand kilograms, which would take years to separate from uranium-238. He had even gone so far as to design the nuclear machine in Hagelosh using graphite to absorb the neutrons. No deuterium was available since the capture of it from Norway, and removal to London, so on the face of it only an energy pile was being investigated. Eventually he had agreed with Melusina, and Carl Friedrich too, much to the Berliners' Schadenfreude, concede that they were to tell the military what they were doing was unachievable without a significant investment, millions of Reichsmarks for a bomb, which would take many, many years, not the months the Chancellor wanted. Then no one will ever have to ask you why you did it. You can say it never became possible, and the course of the war makes it impossible for you to predict how you would have acted. Carl Friedrich was right, of course, and here they all were now, at the pleasure of His Majesty of Great Britain, not harmed, but unturned. This place will have been wired, Lay confided, in the brief moment between him getting out of the armored American jeep and Heisenberg making the jump himself. He thought so too. But his mind was on her, Melusina, who he called Liebeln still, even though his heart belonged to Elizabeth and their 7 children. Life at home with them was pure joy, and the thought of being away from them all for as long as the king took his pleasure was hard to bear. But bear he must. And she was in his thoughts now, Melusina, who, unlike the last time, when the Statsikos Hauptmann had taken her, full of fight and protest, another standing in front of them as they too tried to shout for her return, was subdued, almost as if she expected it. She had come with recommendation from the top, he was told, to work on the uranium issue. She had been taken away, then abruptly returned, and all the time they had worked side by side and made more progress than anyone could ever have guessed, while pretending that their efforts were fruitless. They could not have married, even if she were free. She was not a German, she did not embody the Prussian ideal. But their connection was beyond traditional bounds. He knew she loved him, and, in a way, he loved her. They had a harmony of souls. Ultimately, Heisenberg reflected, as he looked at the living room door, through which their daily food would be brought by the cook, he would never see Melusina again. 88,888,888. It wasn't as if he was not grateful, or that he wasn't pleased to have found a home. But the creeping feeling in Ernst Skeltz's stomach was that he wasn't right for the place, and didn't fit in. Lying awake in his bedroom on the kitchen level of Downton Abbey, Ernst felt tears prick his eyes, and he dashed his fingers to them, angrily. The teasing had stopped, and he had been grateful to Mr. Melsley for getting him the arithmetic work from the grammar school, although, if he were honest, it was a little easy for him to do. No, it was more the apartness that he felt, the gap between him and the other boys of his own age. He had tried to talk to them, of their marbles game, of their tracking game. Ernst knew of one involving stones that he and Erich Weissmuller used to play over the wall of their school. But the conversation always stopped and Ernst was not included. Only little Flora Parker wanted to talk to him, who had even dared once to ask about his life in Germany. But then, Ernst could sense the eyes of the adults upon them, watching him warily when he to him Flora was a little child, like a sister who made him laugh with her directness, and who had taught him the game, Pooh Sticks. Thomas Barrow would try to stop him, Ernst knew, and his heart was sore to feel the sadness he would cause to leave Downton Abbey after he and Lord Grantham had been so accommodating, so kind. But it would never work, not for the rest of his life. The name Ernst Skeltz, and the person attached to that name, would never be accepted. Thomas had greeted him the morning before with a bright hello and had treated him as he had always treated him, with bright, good humor. He liked Thomas, which is why it was going to be hard to leave, and why he had chosen the way he had chosen. That morning, particularly, it was as if Thomas had something he wanted to tell him, but a knock had come at the door and Larry had answered it and Thomas had taken it. Later, Ernst had introduced him to a man who had worked with his mother, and Ernst was pleased to meet him. But he must have known his father too, and this resentment was just too much for him. All knew Werner Heisenberg in Germany, and just what he had been doing for the Reich. Of all the men in the world, it would be at night, or early morning, he would leave a letter. He was grateful for the unfailing kindness that people had shown him, including risking their own reputations and status to stand up for him. But he missed home here was not the same. And as his mother was dead, there was no reason Ernst could see to remain. In the coldness of the night, Ernst sat up, and flung the covers off him, pushing himself up in bed and sitting still to think. He still had the small bag he had brought. He would not take a lot, just a change of clothes, and he had a little money Thomas had given him for helping at the Davis farm. Wages, in effect. So he was stealing nothing. He would go to Constable Pickering's house in Hull, ask his advice. He would go that night,